Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome once again to the I Conversation. It's another bright day, although I know it's night right where I am, but I'm sure it's another bright day for those of you that is still there. It's exciting. I'm coming your way once again with the I Conversation. And interestingly, today, in the spirit of Christmas, I'm hoping to reflect on the family tree of Jesus. Something you see very obvious from the family tree of Jesus is the fact that Jesus had what I call the messed up family tree. And I would just read a reflection from Matthew chapter 1, where I'm just going to focus and to talk again in the spirit of Christmas and reflect on how each and every one of us can live above and beyond the limitations of our family trees. Matthew 1, from verse 1, tells us the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it goes on in verse 2 to say Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Aminadab. Aminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. Then we have down from King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam the father of Abijam. Abijam the father of Asa. Asa the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram. Jehoram the father of Uzziah. Uzziah the father of Jotham. Jotham the father of Ahaz. Ahaz the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah the father of Manasseh. Manasseh the father of Ammon. Ammon the father of Josiah. And Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at that time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel the father of Abihud. Abihud the father of Eliakim. Eliakim the father of Hazon. Hazon the father of Zadok. Zadok the father of Akim. Akim the father of Elihud. Elihud the father of Eleazar. Eleazar the father of Mathan. Mathan the father of Jacob. And Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Oftentimes, it's difficult to go through these passages that have names and have dates and all of that. But we cannot talk about Christmas and neglect the genealogy of Jesus. It gives us a very robust history, a family line, that sort of gave birth to Jesus. We see right from Abraham down to David and down to his father Joseph. But then what is interesting about Jesus's family tree is the fact that we do not see very perfect people. We see people who are filled with terrible stories. We have murderers, we have adulterers, we have liars, we have people who we, in our own context, we do not consider them holy enough to be part of Jesus's genealogy. And if I am to share with you about my family tree, I think my family tree is somehow like Jesus's family tree. And if I'm to have conversations with a lot of people about their family trees, a lot of people sometimes we're very ashamed to even talk about our family trees. And you know why? Because you have a lot of complexities, you have a lot of bad stories, you have a lot of terrible people in your family tree. And even us ourselves, we're not good people either. But then, what is interesting is in Jesus' genealogy is the fact that these people that were mentioned in Jesus's family tree though not perfect, but God was able to use them to bring about the fulfillment of his divine agenda, which was the messianic covenant, which came through this same messed up family tree. The fact that it's a messed up family tree, it did not define Christ. It did not restrict Christ from fulfilling the ultimate goal of being the Messiah. And I mean, sometimes we chat with my wife about our family trees, about our genealogy, and how sometimes you you see how complex it is. Our grandfathers or our parents were married to many wives, and sometimes you can't even tell all your siblings and all your relatives. You just know that you're related to someone. You can't really explain how the relationship is. And sometimes when you think about your genealogy, it comes with a lot of hurt. It comes with a lot of heartbreak. It comes with a lot of sometimes even depressing feeling, because there are people, if you had the power, you would not want them to be part of your family tree. And I bet that there are many people out there listening to me today who would sort of identify with this kind of reflection, who would agree with me that their family trees are messed up. But we see that Christ is a Christ of a messed up family tree, but it did not restrict him from fulfilling the agenda, the goal, the fulfillment of the mandate that God had upon him. And something I find very interesting about Jesus' genealogy is the fact that in most genealogies, especially within the Hebrew context, you would hardly see women mentioned. And for such a noble character like Jesus, the Messiah, it will be very difficult for women to be included in the genealogy of the Messiah of the world. And why is that? Again, we have scholars who have told us that a Jewish man will often pray two types of prayers every day. Thank God for not making me an animal, and thank God for not making me a woman. Which means that within the Jewish culture, or technically within the cultural setting of the ancient Near East, women were not considered with so much value. But then we see that women were reflected in the genealogy of Jesus. But what is again interesting is the fact that when you look at the Bible, you have very amazing women like Sarah, right? The wife of Abraham, women like Leah, Rebecca, and all of those other very noble women as far as we're concerned. We have women like Abigail, who was the wife of David at some point. But we do not see such women included in the genealogy of Jesus. Rather, we see women like Tamar, who was a prostitute. We see women like Ruth, who was essentially a widow that had to, Boaz had to come to her rescue. Who was a widow who again refused to embrace her God, and ran after a strange God that she knew nothing about. And we see again women like women like Uriah's wife, right? Who was married unlawfully. David married her unlawfully, killed her husband, and then married her. And interestingly, we don't even see her name mentioned. Rather, the Bible recognizes her place in the genealogy of Jesus. And these were not perfect women. These were not women that, if you're to write about great women in the Bible, I would rather write about powerful women like Sarah. And interestingly, even Mary, that sometimes we would want to celebrate her as a noble woman. Shockingly, the meaning of her name, rendered in some translations, it means rebellion. And if such a lady, God can entrust such a lady, a virgin, naive, young, but God could, place upon her the mandate of carrying the Messiah of the entire world in her womb. I don't feel that there is any young woman in the entire universe that should think that she's too young or she's too naive to be part of God's big agenda. But the point is, the family tree of Jesus wasn't the best of family trees. It was a messed up family tree. But the beauty is it did not define who Christ was. It did not affect who Christ was. And that's my challenge to you this evening, especially as we reflect on this season of Christmas, that let your family tree not define you. Let your family tree not restrict you. Let your family tree not be the reason why you are not fulfilling God's mandate. Like, I've talked to a lot of young people, and they will tell me the reason why they are not where they are supposed to be is because of the kind of family background they have. You this evening, and I'm saying that your family tree does not define you. It can be messed up. It can be filled with liars. It can be filled with adulterers. Probably you are even giving birth to outside wedlock. It does not change the fact that, as far as God is concerned, He has an agenda. And you have a role to play in God's big agenda. And what is God's agenda? God's agenda, Habakkuk 3:20 will talk about the fact that God desires to see His glory fill the earth as the water covers the sea. And you can't be part of that goal. You can't be part of that agenda. It doesn't matter whether you feel you're young, whether you feel you've messed up your life so badly that you think nothing good can come out of it. Listen to my voice this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are, and acknowledge that God, yes, my family tree probably is messed up. My family tree, I probably don't even remember those who come from my second, first generation or whatever it is. But God, I give myself to you to be part of your big agenda. And I tell you that God is still interested in using people, no matter how lowly their background is, no matter how messed up their family tree is, no matter what you think could be the restriction. It doesn't have to be a noble family tree. You don't have to be given birth to with a gold spoon or a silver spoon or whatever spoon they call it. Probably you are even given birth to without a spoon. God can still use you. God can still make use of your lowly background and your experiences, and God can make something beautiful come out of it. All He desires of you is that you give it to Him. You trust Him. You follow Him. You offer yourself, as Romans 12:1 would say, as a living sacrifice, and you'll be amazed that when you lay yourself on that altar and you say, God, I give you myself, and I don't want my background, I don't want my family tree to restrict me. Yes, we've had issues and concepts of generational curse, right? God is able to lift you far above generational curse, because if Christ will come from such a family tree, and even within the family tree of Jesus, we see God still using very, very obscured, very, very absurd circumstances to bring to bear His agenda. I believe that there is no agenda of the evil one concerning you, concerning your family, that God cannot raise you above it. So if Jesus rose above His family tree, you can also rise above your family tree. And I've heard people say they've set up a limitation for you. You cannot go beyond this level. The highest you can go is secondary school. In my family, every young lady in my family, before she gets to age this, she's already pregnant. In my family, before you get to age 40, you will die or something like that. God is able to raise you above those limitations. God is able to raise you above those limitations. So never let your family tree, never let your family background limit you. You can go beyond and above. All you need to do is to acknowledge that God has a plan for your life. And His plan, they are plans of good and not of evil. Plans to give you an expected end. And God is in the business of working out all things for the good of those who love Him. Now, the question often is, do we love God? And if you love God, be open to His leadership. Be open to listening to God and not just hearing Him, listening to Him. Because sometimes when we hear God, we want to run with what we've heard. But God desires that on a daily basis, real time, we're listening to him and we're asking him, God, what's the next step? God, what's the next direction you want to take me? So please never let your family tree. We see different generations, about 14 generations, right? From Abraham to Jesus. And we see that the whole of that generation was filled with drama of all sorts. The whole of that generation filled with drama of all sorts. Yet, within those nasty, very troubling, very disturbing drama, epic drama, scary drama, dirty drama, God is able to bring forth his Messiah. Nothing could stop that. Nothing could hinder that. So if Jesus could rise above his background, if Jesus could rise above his family tree, you can rise above your own limitations. And when you look at all of these backgrounds, you would see that there is a lot of drama, whether it's political, whether it's economic, whether it's social, whatever it is. Jesus did not come from the best of families. Jesus did not come from the best of families, but he could rise above it and he could, change his own situation, notwithstanding, not allowing his background to be an impediment. And you see, the beauty is whatever experiences you're going through, God can knead that nicely. God can knit that neatly into making you who he desires you to be. So I don't know what is limiting you. It could be a past sin. It could be guilt that you've been carrying for years and for ages. It could be things that you have never been, you've not been able to deal with. It could be fear of the future, fear of things that you can't even imagine, but you're afraid of them. God is able to raise you above all of those limitations. All you just need to do is to acknowledge that, God, you have a plan for me. And if you have a plan for me, I'm willing to listen to you. I'm willing to follow you. I'm willing to obey you. And I think that if you're able to come to that place, God is able to open your mind to see his big picture. And we've seen certain instances where people in scripture were limited by sight. They were limited by what they could see. They were not open to God's big agenda, to God's big vision of what God is doing. We've seen that in several instances in Samaria when there was a siege over Samaria, and then everybody's heart was broken, everybody's heart was melting. We could even see when the children of Israel were going up against Jericho. They were afraid. They were scared. How do we go against this fortified city? But then they did not have to raise a sword against the city. God went ahead of them. And I can mention several other personal experiences of how God has gone ahead of me. God has gone ahead of several other people within our own contemporary setting. So God is still in the business of raising people above whatever generational, whatever background, whatever family limitation that must have been set for you. But you see, the enemy capitalizes on our fear to keep us bound. No one has done this before. Who do you think you are? The enemy makes such suggestions. Nobody has achieved this in your family. Who do you think you are? Just look at your family history. Look at where you're coming from. No one has dared gone beyond this level. Who do you think you are? God can take you above those limitations. Just listen to him and be willing to obey him. I just hope this reflection is able to sort of challenge you this evening and, make you know that you cannot be limited by nothing. Because in him, all things are possible. God is able to enable you in him. And, that is very important, that it has to be in him. Sometimes we want to do things with our own strength. Trust not in your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And you see, that self-sufficiency, we must come to that point where we must acknowledge. And I can understand why God will constantly call David a man after his own heart. David will always come back to that point where he says, God, I need you. God, I acknowledge that on my own strength, within my own power, I can't do it. And I think that is the level of brokenness that God desires from us, to be able to raise us. But most times we're full of ourselves. We're filled with ourselves. And a proud person goes for your downfall comes ahead. As proud as you are, that's the limitation of how much you can rise. But sometimes when you're not full of yourself and you realize that God is in the business of raising humble people, meek people, that is where you begin to experience your upliftment. But when you're full of yourself, you cannot be filled of God. When you're full of self and pride, you cannot experience the lifting of God. So I just pray over your life this evening as you listen to me, and those of you that would watch later, that God is in the business of raising people, but you have to first understand that you cannot be full of yourself, as God is going to raise you above your family tree. And we see instances even with Jesus, that though being God, he did not consider himself. He emptied himself instead. We read that in Philippians chapter 1. And the Bible tells us that God raised him above all other names. And at the name Jesus, every knee must bow and every tongue must confess. So we now understand that the principle to experiencing upliftment is in learning the act of humility and learning the act of humbling ourselves. And that is a daily thing. It's not something you ever attain. It's a daily thing. It's something that you have to constantly remind yourself that, see, I cannot be full of myself and be filled of God. So as I stop here this evening, I trust that the Lord has spoken to you in this season of Christmas. Seek ways to experience this humbling, because again, sometimes we're so full of ourselves even in our giving. We're so full of ourselves even in the way we want to serve others. But you see, when you serve others from that place of humility, you experience God's upliftment. I pray that the Lord will help us, even as we journey through this path of rising above the limitations, rising above our family trees, rising above whatever limitation that the enemy must have set for us. But we have to do that in the place of humility. Thank you once again for joining me. This will be the last conversation for this year, most likely, for this year. And in the spirit of Christmas, I felt I should messed up, but then God came above his family tree. I trust that God will raise you above your family tree, raise you above your limitations in Jesus' name. Amen. So have a blessed Christmas. Merry Christmas in advance. And please ensure you keep the chicken, the chin chin and all of that. For me, I'll be very open for invitation to come and enjoy all the goodies for Christmas. My wife is just eyeing me and wondering why I'm offering myself to visit others. But then, I mean, it's the season of Christmas. Let's have a good time and enjoy ourselves. Merry Christmas in advance to all my viewers. And I trust that the Lord will grant us an excellent season where we would experience him in an amazing way. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the coming year. God bless you and have a blessed night.